Alexander was left enraged at the dining table, but because of what Jean said, he was unable to lash out at her. Jennifer, Jasmine, Joshua and even Eden, who stayed back for dinner, were forced to suppress their anger as well. Jean was as feisty as ever and she was bold enough to go up against anyone. However, something was different about her. She was no longer the rash and impatient girl who disregarded consequences. Everything she said was infuriating but true, hence no one was able to pick on her mistakes. Jennifer glared at her viciously. Back then, she used Jean's temper and attitude to make her soft and tender side stand out so that others would sympathize with her and blame Jean's personality. Now, she seemed to have lost the advantage. Jean was smarter than before. Jennifer grinned though. No matter how smart Jean became, she was just a single mother being forced to marry a lowlife. Her life was over. Jean took George back to the room. She did not have the interest or the time to figure out their schemes. She knew better than anyone that those people down there were cold-blooded and merciless. She looked at George. Had enough? George nodded. When you guys were arguing, I was eating. Good boy, Jean praised the boy. Before they came back, Jean had prepared her son for situations like this and her smart boy did not let her down at all. On the second day, Jean took her boy downstairs and ate like normal. They even had a walk in the front yard as if nothing had happened. At night, when Alexander came home from work, he told Jean to have dinner with the Locke family. Jean simply dressed herself up for the event and brought George along. Alexander wore a gloomy look and asked, "Why are you bringing him?" "He's my son. Of course, I'm bringing him along. Do you know where you're going? When you attended important events, you brought Joshua as well. Are you doing this right now?" Alexander's anger was brewing. "If I were to go against you, I wouldn't be here in the first place. Why are you so concerned? Are you afraid that the Locke family would say no to the wedding? I thought you guys mentioned that I have a son when you negotiated with them." Alexander was silenced by her argument. Jennifer was a woman with high EQ. She knew Alexander dared not lash out on Jean at this sensitive timing, so she said, "Alex, Jean's right. When we talked to the Locke family, they already knew that she had a son. So, she might as well bring him along to meet the opposite, just take it as a preparation for the future." "Whatever," Alexander bellowed before he went into the car. Jennifer followed him into the rear seat. Jean and her son as well as Jasmine and Eden went into the other cars respectively. The three cars arrived at the most luxurious restaurant in Southampton. The jockeys came over and opened the doors for them. Alexander led his family inside the restaurant and headed to the VIP room to meet the Locke family. There was a large round table in the room and the Locke family was already seated. Damien and Octavia, their eldest son, Hugh, and his wife, Naomi, and Hugh's son, Jeremiah. Thaddeus was also there. When the Lawrence family arrived, everyone stood up and welcomed them. Thaddeus was reluctant to accept the wedding proposal at first because regardless of what he did, he could not just accept a single mother to be his wife. However, when he laid eyes on Jean for the first time, his eyes gleamed. Jean beautifully exceeded his expectations. Her wavy hair, delicate face, voluptuous body, and everything about her made her an angel on earth, except for the fact that she had a child. His eyes widened. It was his mother who nudged him to bring him back from his. Thaddeus got up and welcomed everyone warmly. After everyone got seated, the introduction started and was followed by dinner. Throughout dinner, only the head of both families spoke to each other. The others barely made a sound. Halfway through the dinner, Thaddeus excused himself for a phone call. Then, a waiter came in and invited Jean outside. "Second Master Locke wants to meet you outside." Jean wiped her lips before she brought George out together. Outside the VIP room, Thaddeus was waiting for her in the corridor. Jean walked up to him but kept a safe distance from him. Thaddeus cut to the chase and said, "The wedding is next month. It's a little rushed and I believe I need to tell you something before it happens." "Please do, Second Master Locke," Jean said with a smile. Her smile made Thaddeus' heart race. However, no matter how beautiful she was, she had a child with her and it would lower his status for marrying her. "I heard you had a temper, but let me make this straight. I see you had your portion of fun before and if it's not because of your family, this wedding would never happen. So, don't try to act like you deserve this. You'll treat me like a king if you're going to marry me. Don't disobey me and listen to everything I say." Jean stared at him emotionlessly. Thaddeus added, "Don't try to control me. It's your honor to be able to call yourself Mrs. Locke. If I had a woman outside, don't try to cause a scene with me. I don't want all that nonsense, get it?" Jean did not react at all. Her emotionless face made Thaddeus impatient. Did you hear me? Is there anything else? Jean asked instead of answering him. Your son, he'll have to call me daddy. Thaddeus pointed at George. Before Jean could say a word, a strong and charming voice of a man sounded. Who's calling second Master Locke daddy? Thaddeus turned around and saw Edward, the fourth son of the Swan family. Old Master Swan was a reputable figure in Southampton and he had connections to both sides of the law. No other family dared to cross their path in Southampton as they revered the Swan family. As the fourth son in the family, Edward took over his family business at the age of 29. There were a lot of rumors about Edward circulating in high society. The most notable one was him having too much authority and power in his hand and him being chaste, or in other words, gay. He was a handsome and charming man but he had been single for as long as anyone knew. No woman had ever appeared in his company. Jean saw the man as well and she averted his gaze. Thaddeus' arrogance was replaced by flattery immediately. Fourth Master, I didn't mean you. I was just talking to my fiancé's son. He even pointed at George. Edward had a glance at George. George sensed the gaze and stared right into Edward's eyes. Jean furrowed her brows at the stare-down between the man and the boy. She subtly pulled the boy behind her. Edward pulled his gaze back and walked away. Teddy, Edward's attendant, who had been with him since he was young, thought he was seeing things when he saw Edward smile. It was not just a faint grin but a bright smile. A bright smile from the man who barely showed emotions. Thaddeus saw Edward off before he turned to Jean and warned her, remember what I said. He, too, left the corridor. While Jean adjusted her emotions, George tugged her hand. I don't like him. Thaddeus Locke. No, that fourth Master Swan guy. George's youthful voice sounded serious. Jean had a good look at her son. Due to his high IQ, he barely argued with people below his standards and yet fourth Master Swan was able to make the boy dislike him. It was surprising and unusual. She smiled and said, what a coincidence. I don't like him either, but, George looked at his mother. But what? Don't cross paths with him. He's not someone you'd want to mess with, Jean said. Why? George furrowed his brows. You can't afford it. George looked at the man walking away. He begged to differ.